Welcome to another video. My name is Radi and you're watching my channel Radi the Brand. Today we're going to do a slightly bigger project using NodeJS, Express and EJS. We're going to be building a simple news website where the data comes from an external API. The main features of this project will include displaying listing the articles, having a full view of a specific article, and also we will add a search functionality. I tried using the newsapi.org website to pull the news data for the articles, but the information wasn't good enough, so I decided to use my blog, which is built on WordPress, and it has REST API built in by default. Saying this, feel free to use whatever API you like. The only difference is going to be the URLs, the parameters and the object names, I think. I can't express how easy it is to get started. Please note, we won't be doing much CSS in this project as we are mainly focusing on building the functionality. As always, the code will be available on my website. Please smash the like button, consider subscribing to my channel, and let's go! Welcome everybody, let's get started. First of all, I have already created a project folder called NodeJS News Website Recording, and this is where I will be initializing the project. So if you're on Windows, you can do left shift, right click, open PowerShell window here. And if you're on Mac, you're gonna have to be using the terminal, I assume, and all you have to do is cd to your project folder. Once you're here, let's initialize a new project by doing npm init, and this will ask us a couple of questions. The only question that I'm going to answer is the package name. This is basically the name of our project, so I'm just going to call mine nodejs-news. For the rest, I'm just going to be pressing enter to save us some time, and once we're done, this will ask us, is this okay? And I'll just press enter again, and this should create the package.json file for us in our project folder, as you can see in here. For this project, I will be using Visual Studio Code, but of course, feel free to use whatever code editor you prefer. With Visual Studio Code, you can usually do code space column and press enter, and this will open the project for you, which will save us a little bit of time. But if you're not using Visual Studio Code, just go to your code editor, file, open project, and continue from there. Now that we are here, let's open the package.json file and quickly have a look at it. As you can see, we have a few things here like the name, the version, the things that we just created. But before we start programming, we need to add a few dependencies. The dependencies that we need to add are Axios, body parser, EJS, and Express. Let's have a look at how we can do that. In PowerShell, for me here, I can just clear everything for a second. And let's start installing all the packages now. We can do npm install, and we can start listing the packages that we need. The first one is Axios. The second one that we need is the body parser. Then we need the EJS templating engine, and last but not least, we need Express. Press enter once you're done, and this should install all the dependencies for us. And if you go back to Visual Studio Code, you will see the dependencies being added here in our package.json file. Now, the last thing that I want to do in this file is to add NodeMon. NodeMon will basically restart the server for us every time we make a change in our project. So that's quite useful, and let's have a look at how we can add it. To add NodeMon, we need to add it as development dependency. So to do this, we can do npm install -save -dev, and then we can do NodeMon. This should take a couple of seconds as well. And once this is done, we can go back to package.json, and as you can see in here, we have dev dependencies NodeMon. To make sure that our project starts with NodeMon, we actually first of all gonna have to create our main file of our application, and I usually call this app.js. So So let's create a new file called app.js in our root folder. And let's make sure that this app.js file is run with nodemon. To do this, under scripts in our package.json file, we can do start, column, and then we can do nodemon space app.js. And then we need to finish this with a comma. Save this, and we can close the package.json file now and start writing our application. To get started, the first few things that we need to do is include express and make sure that our express starts on a specific port number that we will add in a second. The first thing that we need to do here is set up our express app. To do this, let's include express by doing const express equals require, and this will require, and we need to require express inside here, just like so. Then we need to make sure that we run express, so we can do const app equals express, and we need to set a port number, so we can do const port equals 5000. And last but not least, we need to make sure that our app is listening on this port. To do this, we can do let's comment here, listen on port 5000, just like so, and we can do app.listen and then pass the port number, which is 5000 here. We just pass the variable, comma, and we're gonna have an arrow function in here, so we can do it like this. And for the arrow function, all I want to do is I want to console log listening on port number. So to do this, let's do console.log, and with the single slanted brackets, we can do listening on port, and we can pass the port number with a $sign and curly brackets, and then the port variable from here. Save this, and technically speaking, if we run the project now from PowerShell, we can do npm start, and if everything is working, we should be getting this green line here saying starting node app.js listening on port 5000. This is all good so far, but of course, if we go to the browser right now and we try to visit localhost on port 5000, you will see that we're getting this cannot get. And we will get to all of this in a second, but we're gonna have to set up our project folders first, set up our views, routes, partials, CSS, and so on before we do that. So let's not rush anything. Let's set up our project and do everything one by one. Before we do any more code in our app.js file, let's actually start looking at the project folder. And then we will be doing things one by one so it all makes sense. So first of all, let's start by creating our public folder. And this is where we can store things such as CSS, images, any other external JavaScript that you might use. Hopefully we won't have to, but just for example, I'm going to create 3 folders. So let's say we have a CSS folder, we have images folder, we have JavaScript folder. Of course, I probably won't be using the JavaScript and the images, but it's just good to have, just in case you want to add your logo or you want to make your website look a lot better than I will. Now for the CSS, I'm definitely gonna have some CSS. So let's create an SCSS file, and I'm going to call mine styles.scss. I like using SCSS just because of the nesting, but of course you can just use normal CSS if you wish to. And in Visual Studio Code, I am using the extension called Live Sass Compiler, which will compile the SCSS into a normal CSS. So let's do that. Let's watch for SCSS changes. And as you can see, this compiled my styles.scss into a CSS file. Let's close the CSS because we're done with this. As I said, we're not going to have any images or JavaScript, but just for the example, let's leave them in here. And let's now create our source folder, which will be structured in here in the root. So we can do source. And inside the source folder, we'll have things such as the routes, views, partials, and so on. So let's create the first folder, which will be our views. And let's create another folder, which will be our routes. And inside the views, let's create another folder, which will be partials. Now, everything will make sense once we start creating the code for this, so don't worry. The first thing that we might want to do is to create a view. And because we are kind of like creating a news app, let's create a file called news.ejs. We will be using EJS for our view engine. Let's now create a route file, and I'm going to create the route file with exactly the same name as the news, but let's do news.js. And the reason for this is because think the views as kind of like or HTML, and think the routes, the news.js file as the functionality of the news EJS file, if that makes sense. So inside here, we can actually start writing our HTML just like so. And let's add a title. So for example, I don't know, node.js news. And we can actually include our style sheet. So we can do link.css. And now inside here, you might see that we're going to have a little problem. In order for me to go to the public folder, CSS, and then add my styles.css file, it's going to take a little bit of work. So we're going to have to go backwards. Then we're going to have to go inside the public CSS. And this could be a little bit of a pain. And this is where we're going to be using the static files, which I will show you in a second. So what I want to actually achieve is I want to make sure that every time we put something like /css, I want this to correspond to this folder. And if, for example, we added an image with the source, I want to be able to do /img and then the actual image. So I don't know, cat.jpg, and I want this to be going inside public images and then cat.jpg. To be able to do this, we're going to have to do this inside the app.js. And in a moment, we'll have a look at the routes as well. So let's go back and let's set our static files. Let's comment here. Everything will make sense as we are going through. So don't worry. I know at the moment we haven't seen anything working yet, but as long as you go into your PowerShell and you're not seeing any errors, we should be good to go. Let's minimize this and continue. So let's set up our static files. To set up the static files, we can actually use express static. So to do this, let's do app.use express.static, and then we need to pass the public folder, this folder here. So in order to be able to use the /css /images or /js, we need to do the following. We need to do app.use, and we need to then pass the folder that we want to, the path that we want to use. So for example, /css, and then we need to actually tell express static where this CSS folder is. So we can do express.static, and now we can go to the root folder by using the dir name functionality. Dir name is basically a middleware function to save files from within a given root directory. So basically I want to go to the root directory of this project with dir name, and then I want to add public, which is the public folder here, and then /css, just like so. And hopefully this will now allow us to write, if we go back here, hopefully this will allow us to write /css, and then my file is actually called styles with an s at the end .css, and hopefully this should now work. But also I want to add images and JS just so you have it as an example. To do this, I'm going to use Alt, Shift and down arrow to copy this line twice, and I'm going to change this to images like so, and I'm going to change this to JS, JavaScript. The next important bit that we need to do is make sure that we have our templating engine set to EJS, as you can see here, EJS. Earlier, when we started this project, we did add EJS, if you remember, so we can start using it straight away by doing the following commands. So inside here, let's do templating engine. And to include the templating engine and the views, we can first of all, but before I add EJS, I want to make sure that our view engine view path is actually set to this views folder. And to do this, we can do app.set views, and then I can do comma, and inside single quotes, I can do dot/source, which is the source folder here, and then slash views, and then we can set the view engine to be EJS by doing app.set view engine and then comma EJS. If you wish to use something else, all you have to do is change the view engine name from here, so you can use something like perk, handlebars, or whatever you wish. Now that we are done with the templating engine, we actually need to set our route and the route that we want to use. Now let's do this inside here, and I know that we still haven't seen anything working on the page, but bear with me, we need to set up all of this, and we are getting close. We are getting very, very close. So let's set up the route. For the routes, first of all, I want to create a variable which will go to the routes folder and select this news router for us. To do this, let's do a const, and I'm going to call my router news router, and this will be equals require, and then we need to pass the folder, which will be dot source slash routes slash news. And we don't actually have to specify .js. Express is clever enough to do this for us. Now we need to make sure that our front page is using this router. To do this, we can do app.use, and our front page will be basically just slash. So if you go back to the URL, you will see that we just have the domain name, which is at the moment localhost with the port number, and we just have basically slash. And this will be your home page, and we want our home page to be using this news router. To do this, we can do comma and then pass the news router, which we just created here. And later on, by the way, I will show you how to create more routes so you can create more pages and so on. In fact, we probably need to create one more anyway, but we will do that when we need it, so you don't get confused. So far, so good. We can actually close pretty much everything now. Maybe go to news EJS inside the views, and let's just output something like h1 new node.js news, just like this. And now we can start writing our router. For the router, there is a few things that we need to do, and let's first of all include express again. Express equals require express, just like we did in our app.js. And also let's use the express router. So we can do const, let's call this one news router equals require. Sorry, this will be equals express dot router, just like this. And a very important thing that we need to do is export this module. We need to do module dot exports, and we need to export the news router, just like so. Don't forget this line, it's important for this to work. Technically speaking, we should be able to now use this router, and let's see if we can actually render the news.ejs. To do this, let's use the news router now, news router dot get method. I'm not going to pass any parameters in here. We're just going to do comma. This will be an asynchronous function, so we can do async, and we're going to have the request and the response, and this will be an arrow function, just like so. So technically speaking, now we should be able to render our news page. To do this, we can do response.render. And then we want to render this news EJS page. And to do this, we can just do news. And in fact, yeah, we're not going to pass anything. So hopefully this should actually work. Let's save this. And finally, we should be getting, if we go back to the PowerShell, let's press a button, maybe C. I don't know. Everything seems to be working. Let's make sure everything is saved. And yeah, everything, the NodeMon just restarted, I believe. So hopefully speaking, if you go back to the browser and go to localhost with the port 5000 and we press enter, we should be able to render the news.ejs page, which will output node.js into an H1. And if we inspect the source of this, Control and U, you will see that we have the HTML page, which we added in here. So that's pretty awesome. We have all routes working, we can create more, and so on. Okay, we've actually managed to do so much so quickly, and now is the interesting part. For the next part, you can use any API that you wish. Originally, I wanted to use this news API, which is kind of like one of the popular news APIs, or you could use Bing as well. But the reason that I didn't end up using it is because it doesn't provide very much information. It's a little bit, most of the images are broken and it just doesn't look pretty. And also I think that the only way you could really use this information is that if you just list news and directly link those news to the real articles. As you can see, the content is very short. It's nice and fast for learning purposes, but I don't know if I would use this in a normal project. Maybe the paid version has more content, I don't know. But feel free to use this. Feel free to use this. It would be very similar to what I would be doing anyway. I decided to actually use my WordPress website, which I know that is not going to be like a news website, but it's the same principle. We have headlines, we have content, we have images, and so on. And the reason I wanted to use this is because the WordPress has built REST API, which provides so much information and it's a lot more fun to work with. The WordPress REST API, you can simply go to a WordPress website unless they've blocked it, and you can do wp-json, then wp/v2, and then, for example, you can do, there are different endpoint, but for example, you can do posts / and this should bring all the posts, or at least a few posts from my website. As you can see, we have so much more information that we can work with. I know that some of the articles, like the information is actually rendered with like HTML, but this could be actually a good thing in a way, just because all articles will look a little bit better than they would if it was just plain text. To help us out, I'm actually going to be using a tool called Postman, which you can install on Mac, Linux, and Windows. And Postman is basically really handy if you want to like organize a collections of API calls. I have my Node.js news here organized, and for example, just the thing that I just showed you, I have, for example, let's remove this. I have my website, wp-json, wp-v2/post, and I can use anything like the get method, the post method, and so on to test stuff. And if I send this, you will see the output. It's a lot, like I would say, it's a lot prettier, a lot easier to read, and we can do all sorts of stuff with this. And you can do this in the browser as well, or you can use it in here. I just like saving some of the routes. It makes it a little bit easier. And some of the routes that we'll be using is posts. We have individual posts here with an ID. We have search, for example, search Photoshop, and so on. So let's end this and see the information that we get. By the way, this is my website. This link will be available in the description below. But if you have your own API, if you wish to use the news API, feel free to do that. This will be much faster than mine because my hosting is a little bit slow. And to be fair, if too many of you are using mine, my server might crash, you never know. So yeah, if you have your own WordPress website, feel free to use yours, or feel free to use this news API, or you can use anything like Twitter, Medium, Bing News, or whatever. Enough talking, let's continue by pulling up some data. Now, if you remember, if you open package.json, we installed this dependency called Axios, and this is basically going to help us to fetch the data from my blog. To use this, we can simply go to the news router, open this, and we can include it in here. So let's do const Axios, and then we can require by doing Axios inside here like so. Now to use Axios is actually fairly simple and fairly powerful. And Axios help us with a bunch of stuff such as error handling. It makes sure that the data is passed in a JSON file and so on. But let's have a look at how we can use it. So we're actually going to comment this out for now because we won't need it. And let's start. First of all, I want to wrap everything into a try and catch just in case we have any errors. This will be very handy. So let's do try catch. Inside try, let's pass our URL that we're going to be getting the data from. So in this case, I'm going to be passing write.co.uk, wp-json, wp v2 posts. So let's copy this and we can do a const. And let's say news API is equals, we can do await, which will be asynchronous, asynchronous, and we can do axios.get, and then we can pass the URL just like so. And the reason I'm putting it into the slanted single quotes is just in case we need to pass any data later on inside here with the $sign and the curly brackets. So for now, we won't be doing this. Now that we get the data from this URL, it's actually super easy to do. We can literally access this data by doing news API, and then .data, and this will grab this object for us here. To prove, to show you that this is working, what we can do is we could potentially console log this. So let's do console.log, and inside the console log, let's do news API.data, and let's save this. Hopefully we're not going to get any errors now, but if we go to a page and refresh, you will see that we are getting this massive array, which is pretty much this, everything that came up from Postman. And this is awesome. It means that we can access this object now and start putting some of the data. Before we do that though, we need to make sure that we have something in place for the errors. So for the errors, let's do error to be shorter. And inside here, we can do if response, if error dot response. Then we can handle this in a couple of ways. We can do console log error dot response dot data. We can also do response status. We can also do response headers and so on. And also we can have else if. We can have error dot request. And this will basically handle requests that were made by the server and return no response. So we can maybe do console log, and we can have error dot requests. Copy this like so, and then we're gonna have else. If something is wrong with the request, then we can do console dot error, and we can pass error /error dot message. For more information on Axios, just go to the npm package, and they have a bunch of other examples that you can do. But this is fairly solid example, and we should be good to go in here to start using it. We do have to do a couple of more things, but we'll get to that in a second. If you want to render this data on our news.ejs, what we have to do is do the same thing that we did in here, but pass some data. So let's copy this. In fact, let's remove it, and we can render it in here. So try to get the data and then render the data in here. So I'm going to actually remove the console log because we won't need it anymore. And we can do rest.render news. News is the EJS page that we want to render. And we want to pass the object that we want to render. And we need to pass this data here. To do this, we can do comma, and then inside curly brackets, we can pass it as articles, for example. So because we are pulling articles, let's name it articles. And then the data that we are getting from this. So we can do news API, like so, dot data. So hopefully this articles will be holding all the data, and now we have to loop through this using EJS and output some of the articles on our page. Let's have a look at how we can do this. And by the way, I could have created a variable for this, but I didn't think that it's necessary. The code is fairly simple here, so let's just use it as it is. So let's save this and have a look at how we can actually loop through this articles object. Let's tidy this up as well, like this, and save. Let's go to the views news.ejs and let's have a look at how we can loop through the articles. So what I want to render, for example, this is one object, one big object. So I can go inside here and I can start rendering some of those details. For example, I want to render the title, and inside the title, we're going to have to render this render title. So let's just remember this and let's go back and make sure that we loop through them. We can actually write JavaScript in EJS, and the way it works is we can open EJS by doing arrow and percentage, and we can close EJS by doing another percentage and the closing array. So inside here, we're gonna have to do a for each so we can loop through these article objects. So let's copy this, paste the articles.forEach. And then this will be a function which will take two parameters. First one will be article. And this will be basically the key for looping through each object. And then we can actually also have index as well if you wish to. So we know every time we loop through an item, we can give it an index. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I probably won't be using this in this example. And then we need to actually cut this bracket, open curly brackets, and let's make sure that we close everything before we do anything else. So open EJS, close EJS, curly bracket, close curly bracket, close curly bracket, and close normal bracket. We should be good to go. And now I want to loop through the articles, and inside articles, I want to render, for example, the title. And inside the title, we have rendered. So remember this, some of them we can just render straight away, but this one, the title has a rendered object inside it. So what we have to do is we can do the article dot title dot rendered and save. Actually, this needs to be inside EJS as well. So let's open EJS like so, and put dash on this one because we'll be rendering text. And let's close EJS, save this, and let's have a look at what we get. If we refresh the page, you should be able to see a lot of titles. Obviously at the moment we don't have any styles, but as long as you're getting the data, this is really good. What I want to do next is spend 2-3 minutes doing the CSS. The video will be sectioned, so you can actually skip this section if you're not interested at doing the CSS. So let's super quickly style something. So let's make our website look a little bit better now. This section is all about the CSS. First of all, let's create a header for our website. And this header will actually have a class of header. And inside here, I'm thinking of adding a logo and maybe the search bar. So for the logo, we can do div with the class name of header _ logo. And I'm not actually going to have a logo, but let's just do node.js news. And let's add our search bar. I hope that you can hear the noise from the outside. For the search bar, let's do a form. For the search bar, let's do another div with the class name of header. underscore underscore search. And this is where at the end we'll be creating our search bar. But for now, let's just put search like so and save. Okay, now that we have the header, let's save and see what we get. We have the NodeJS header, we have the search. Let's add a few more elements to style or wrapper, and then we'll jump to the CSS. For the wrapper, I'm just going to keep this super simple. So let's do a class name of wrapper. And I'm going to wrap all my articles inside this wrapper, just like so. And then for the news, what I'm thinking of doing is I'm just going to have another class name of news, just to make it look a little bit different. And I'm going to wrap this inside news, just like so. So the wrapper will be global, but this news will be maybe just specific to this page. We'll see. And then for each article, I actually want to make sure that each article is kind of like a card. So what I can do is, let's do another class name of news underscore underscore card and do that. And let's wrap the content inside it, just like so. It will make sense in a minute. And actually, I want all the cards to be links. So instead of a div, let's do this as a link. And I'm going to have to do href now. And maybe for now, let's leave this with hashtag, just so we don't have broken links. And we can style it, and then we'll come back to all of it. I think this is looking good. So we only have the title. Let's render this into maybe like an h2 tag. Let's say h2. Let's render some text. So can we do lorem ipsum? Yes. Okay. So we can do lorem ipsum in here and toggle word wrap. Just for example, of course, we're going to get the original text from the API later. And maybe we'll have a thumbnail as well, but we'll do that a little bit later. So let's save this and let's see how this looks like. It's probably not going to be pretty. But okay, we have all the titles and so on. Let's make sure that we style them super quickly. And I'm actually going to do all the styling right now all together. So let's get on that. I'm going to keep this super basic. And before we start doing anything else, I'm going to include a font from Google, and this font is called Source Sans Pro. So you can find this on Google Fonts, and let's include that and continue. Save this and let's jump to styles.scss. I'm just going to do very basic styling for this, and I will be super quick. So let's get going. So for the body, we're going to reset the margin with pressing margin 0. Let's do the font family to the font that I just included, which is Source Sans Pro. Let's do sans serif. Then let's make sure that our background color is not white, because I want to make the cards to white. So let's do something grayish like F6, F6, F6. Probably F6 would, I don't know. This will do. Let's save this. Let's go back, have a look. Okay, so for the images, I'm just gonna make them kind of responsive. So we can do max width. Let's do 100%. For the headings, let's make sure that the font size is like slightly smaller than the default one. So font size, this will be 1.6 rem. Like so. Then we're not gonna have a button because the articles will be kind of like cards. So let's not do that. Let's start the header now. So we have a class of header, and inside the header, because we have two divs, if you remember, we have the div with the logo and the search. What we can do is display this as flex, justify the content so they are spaced between, so they're like to the left and the right. Then align the items to center. Then we can do padding of 10 pixels. Then we can do the color to be kind of like white. And then let's add the background color to make it more interesting to nice green color that I've been using lately. And let's add a little bit of margin for so the header pushes the content below. So margin bottom 10 pixels and save. Okay, for the logo, I'm actually not gonna do anything for this. So let's just start the search for now. And I've already prepared the search, so I'm going to copy and paste it to save us some time. So basically I'm gonna have two inputs, one for the text and one for the submit button, and they just have some padding, and I've removed the border. That's pretty much it, so I don't want to waste any time on this. For the actual wrapper of the page, which is this one, I actually just want to push the content from the sides here. So we have a little bit of padding. Let's do that now. We can do this by just doing wrapper. I'm just going to do padding of 0, 1 rem, which means that we're going to have padding 0 top and bottom and 1 rem left and right, and that's pretty much it. So now for the news, for the news part, can indent as well if you like. Let's do .news. We can display this as grid to save a little bit of time. So let's do display grid, and I can do grid template columns, and I can use the repeater, and then let's say autofill to make it kind of responsive, and then min max will be 360 pixels minimum for each card, and 1 fraction of the screen maximum for each card. That's good. Also, let's give it a little bit of gap between each card, so we can do grid dash gap, and that could be to rem, it doesn't matter. Then for the cards, let's just make them look slightly better than they are now. So we can do cards, and inside here we can do text decoration. And then because I actually wrapped the cards are actually links, so they are going to be underlined. So let's do text decoration none, and then we can set up some sort of a color. I don't know. Let's do I kind of want a black color, but I don't want it to be too black. Let's do something like this. This will do. RGB 888. That would be fine. And then the background color I want to set as white, and I want to have each card to have a little bit of padding so they have some space, breathing space. And last but not least, I've prepared some drop shadow on hover for the cards. So let's do and hover and add the box shadow in here, and that's pretty much done for this page. So we can close this, refresh, and let's have a look what we get. Okay, this is much better. Of course, we don't have any of the images and we don't have any of the real text. So let's have a look at how we can bring the images and how we can bring the text. As you can also see, we have the title here looking nice, and the search. We'll handle the search a little bit later on in this tutorial. Let's bring the data. To bring the data, if you remember, we done article title.rendered, and this was taken from this main object. So we have title.rendered. Okay, so we've rendered the title, but instead of rendering the whole content here of the article, all I want to render is the excerpt and then render it. So let's do that. We can do this by copying this line here, in fact, and pasting it inside the p tag. Let's have a look. Let's remove everything and paste it inside here. So instead of article title, we're gonna have to do article excerpt, and this is again rendered. So let's save this, go back to the browser, refresh, and as you can see, all the text is now rendered. This is exactly the same text as if you were to go to my website in this quick tutorial. And this is awesome. Let's have a look at how we can render the picture now of the article. And for the picture, for the image, I actually done a little bit of modification to my WordPress so we can output it in here. So if I scroll down, we can find the thumbnail URL in here. So let's use that as well. And I will show you another trick in a second. So for the image, I am actually thinking of just adding it in here. So img source, and we need to pass the source just with EJS like this, dash article dot thumbnail underscore URL, and let's close EJS. And let's close the image as well, but we're probably going to need an alt tag as well, I don't know what to use for the alt tag. Maybe we can just use the title rendered like so and save. Let's go back, refresh. And as you can see, some of the images are probably too big, that's why they're rendered a little bit slower. But as you can see, we're now getting the images, which is pretty awesome. Title and everything is looking good. Now, if something happened to this API and it didn't work, let's say we made inside route, let's say we made a spelling mistake. So I'm gonna put 2. Let's refresh the page. Let's see what happens. As you might notice now, we're probably gonna get an error. As you can see, we're getting an error here, and our website is just spinning and nothing is happening. So let me show you how we can actually handle this. So what we could do, potentially if we get an error, we could copy this, paste it in here. So we still want to render the page, but maybe we want to say articles. This time we don't have anything in articles. So we can say articles equals no. And if articles is equals new, we can check with EJS. So we're going to have to do an if statement inside here. So let's start EJS. Just like so. Sorry, it's going to be if articles is not equals no, just like so. Then we want to proceed and display all the data. But if article is equals no, then we're gonna have to do somewhere around here. We're gonna have to do our else statement. Else, did I close this? Sorry, I need to close this with a curly bracket as well. Don't forget. And we can do else, close. Let's open EJS and close the curly bracket, just like normal JavaScript. And inside here, we can put some message saying no posts found or something like that. Of course, you can style this to look a lot better than it would right now. But hopefully speaking, if we save this and if we go back and refresh, thing is spinning, but I think we've broken it. Let's have a look. Maybe we need to cut it. Error not found. That's good. Hopefully, let's start this again. Hopefully, now the problem here is that if I go and refresh now, I don't know what the error is. The error could be inside here, or the error could be inside here. What was the error? The error was that ready.co.uk wasn't found. So the error could technically be inside here. So what I could do is technically copy this, and we still want to render our message. So let's copy this 3 times, save it, and let's go back to a browser and refresh. So as you can see now, because we're getting this error here, we are actually checking with EJS if article is new, and then we are rendering no post found. So instead of our page spinning, we actually have something in place for the error. The next thing that we want to do, obviously, let's first of all fix the API call here. So I'm going to remove the 2 and save. Let's go back and have a look whether everything is working, and that's fine. Now, the next thing we can do is create a new router. So when we click on one of those articles, we can actually view the full information of the article. To do this, first of all, let's have a look at how the WordPress JSON API works. If we go back, the way it works is every article has a unique ID, and we can actually query each article with this unique ID. So if we copy this ID, this has a title of NodeJS Puppeteer. So let me find the correct one. And so for example, inside here, we have posts, and then we're passing an ID. So if I pass the ID that I just copied and get the request, you will see that we're only getting one object, and this object is the one that we need, which is the Node.js Puppeteer. So this is how we can actually use this ID parameter for the link and get the correct data. Let's have a look at how we can do this. So first of all, let's make sure that our link has this ID. So what we can do is Inside here, we can open EJS, close EJS, and we can do article.id. As you saw article.id in here, we want to grab that. But also I want to create, we could potentially render the full article in here, but I want to show you how we can do another route. So what we can do is, let's call this route article, for example. So we can do /article. So this will be the full article. And if we save, go back to the page, and if you hover over here at the bottom, we're not getting the ID. So oh, okay, we're not getting the ID because I forgot the dash in here. So let's save this. And now if we refresh again and hover over one of them, if you see here at the bottom, we're getting different IDs for each article, which is brilliant. And so if I was to click in this, you will see that we are getting article with this 5372. And now we just need to create this number with the WordPress API, which I will show you in a second, by doing this basically, and get the information. All right, let's have a look at how we can use this ID now to actually query the data and display the full article. Now, we could potentially create a different route for a single page, but I was thinking that it might be best just to keep all the news functionalities inside this route. So it's up to you whether you want to split them. Maybe if your project becomes too big, you could split the routes into route single and route search and so on. But for now, I'm just going to use one and show you how we can do this. So luckily for us, there is not much that we have to do. We can literally copy this. We can paste it in here. And all we have to do is this time, instead of just get nothing, I want to get this ID from here. To do this, we can use the body parser to pass data from one page to another, just like we're doing so right now. So let's go back to app.js and let's include the body parser. To include the body parser, we can do this under here, under the express. So let's do const body parser, and this will be equals require, and we need to require the body parser, body dash parser, just like so. And we need to add one more line to use the body parser URL encoded. So we can do this somewhere here below our engine. And if you want to have a look at the body parser in more details, there's so many options. But for this example, the URL encoded is probably the best one to use, I guess. So let's use that. app.use body parser .url encoded, and then we need to do extended, and this is equals to true, just like so. And we should be good to go. Technically speaking, we should be able to get the data now by using the body parser. Let's close app.js and go back. And now to get the ID from this, all we have to do is /column ID. And now we can actually get the ID by doing, for example, let's make it a little bit more clear. We can do article ID equals request dot params dot ID. And technically speaking, if I console log this should give us the ID that we're passing, but there is no point. So all we have to do now is get this number get this number that we've passed and just include it inside here with the $, curly brackets, and pass article ID. So technically speaking, that's all good, but I actually want to make, and I could render this in the news page, but let me actually show you how we can render this in another page. Maybe you want the page to look slightly different. Yeah, let me show you how we can render this in another page that can be totally different. Let's create a new page. Let's create a new page called news single.ejs. And for the new single, we can actually copy all of this and paste it in here. We'll do some modifications in a second. And let's finish the rest of the stuff. So we need to change this to be news single. And let's just quickly copy and paste. And instead of articles, let's make sure that this object is called article, just because we're only going to have one article. I think it makes more sense, and you'll see why in a second. And if we go back now to new single, instead of looping, because we don't have an object, instead of looping through object, we can actually do something else. Maybe let's remove pretty much, yeah, let's remove everything. Let's remove everything and just make sure that, and let's remove the image as well, and just make sure that this is actually still says article, just because this is basically equals this here. So let's save this. And also I'm going to change this to news single, and let's add a little bit of CSS to make it a little bit better. News single. We can do background color, FFF, max width, let's say 1300 pixels. It doesn't matter too much. Margin we can set to 0 auto, and let's just add some padding everywhere, and that will do. Let's close this. And the last thing that we need to do is set kind of like a URL for this page. And to do this, we can go back to app.js, and inside here, when we have, this is the front page technically speaking, so we can copy this, and we want to have an article one now, and we can still use the same news router as we used above here, just because they are all in the same page. And technically speaking, if we save everything, go back, refresh, and if we click on one of the links, you will see that we are getting NodeJS Express EJS layout, and we are getting some of the content. Let me click on another one, and now let's start populating this with a little bit more data. So instead of, let's have a look at what we have. Instead of the excerpt, we probably want to use the content rendered. So let's copy this and change the article excerpt to content rendered, and I'm actually going to skip the image. I don't really want the image. And one thing that I noticed is that we could potentially have a link back to the home page, and I'm just going to be a little bit lazy with this, so I'm just going to create a link here, href with just a slash, and then we can just say and lrr, which is like an arrow in HTML, and just do dash back. Okay, let's save this. Let's have a look at how this looks. Okay, as you can see, we have the link back. I'm not going to style this, it's no point. We have the title, we have the content, which is actually rendered with all the HTML that comes from WordPress. It's looking nice. Of course, we can do it a bit more styling, like some of the buttons and something like that and stuff like that. But for this tutorial, doesn't matter too much because we're mainly focusing on how we can do all this. So let's click back and have a look at another article. So maybe we want this Express EJS layout article. As you can see, this is all rendering nicely and so on. Okay, the last thing that we need to do is the search. As you might have guessed, the search is going to be very similar, but instead of getting data like here and here, we need to post data. And the posting data, we can do very similar to this. But first of all, let's explore how we can do that with the WordPress API. Now, to search for data, let's have a look at which one it was. To search for data with WordPress, you can actually do post $search equals and then the thing that you need to search for. So let's make a note of this first of all and paste it inside here. And I'm going to keep everything to do with news in the same router. Of course, as I said, you can split it into different routers if you wish to. So for the news, it's going to be very, very similar. Let's copy this and paste it. And now there are a few things that we need to do. First of all, we need to change the URL. So we need to change this. Let's remove that. We need to pass the parameter inside here. But before we do that, we need to post that parameter. So instead of get, let's do post now. Let's make sure that this is now empty. And to post the parameter, first of all, we need to actually create the form, give or input a name. So let's first of all do that. And I can actually do that in news. Let's do it in news and let's do it in here, and then I'll move it later on. So for the form, I'm going to actually just copy and paste the form to save us some time. But the most important bit here is that you have a form with an action of slash, and then the method must be post. And also inside here, the important bit is that for the input, we have the name of search, which we're going to use right now. And the input submit just has a value of search. That doesn't really matter too much. So the most important bit here is the action, method of post, and the name for the input of search. So let's save this and have a look at how it looks like. If you can see here, we have the search bar and we have the search button. It doesn't look too pretty, but it will do the job. To get the search parameter, we can now use the name let's actually close everything that we don't use. And now we need to get the search parameter, and we can do the same thing as we done in here. We got the ID from here, but instead of ID, let's do body and let's do search. And instead of article ID, let's change this to something like search. And let's pass the search variable inside here, parameter. So we can do $, curly brackets, and inside here we pass search. To render the results, let's do another page. So let's actually copy the news EJS, everything from here. Let's do news search.ejs, and let's paste everything inside here. And because we'll be looping through object with a lot of data, we can leave the for each object in here, and we just need to make sure that we have, instead of article, we have articles, 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 and articles. Now that we've created the new search page, the last thing that I spotted is that we didn't change the render to news search. So let's do that quickly and save. Hopefully, if you go back, refresh, and if we search for something that I might have on my blog, for example, Photoshop, let's click search. You will see that I'm getting 2 articles for Photoshop. Because we copied the stuff from the news page, we actually still have the links in here, as you can see, and I should be able to click on them, and this should lead me to the actual article. So if I look on this one, this will lead me to the article, and so on. So let's search for Node. This comes up with more articles. I can click on them and they pop up, and so on. The last thing that I wanted to show you is that we could potentially use the partials for the search. So instead of duplicating the search a few times in here, so where is it? So in this page, we have this header search. What I can do is cut this, paste it into particles, paste it into partials, sorry, new file .ejs, paste it inside here, and we can actually include this file everywhere now by opening EJS, include .partials /search.ejs, and then make sure you close the EJS, and hopefully that should bring the same stuff to the home page. So the search should be still there. If I click on another one, obviously we don't get the search there, so let's include it quickly. I'll copy this, paste it on this page here. Where is it? Here. And let's do that for the search page, which is, for the single page as well. So I can just paste it in here. Technically speaking, now on all pages, we should have the search. Let's search for JavaScript. and this should bring all the posts that I have with JavaScript. That's pretty much everything from this tutorial. I hope that you found it useful. Please consider subscribing to my channel, it will help me a lot. Smash the like button if you like the tutorial and if you find it useful. And let me know in the comments below what you will be building next with Node.js. And also, if you have any questions, please let me know. I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching.